Greetings, Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings be upon those who follow guidance. This is a video response to Pamuk7, his views on marriage under the age sex is wrong. So basically I will go through Chrissy's latest video against me, and I will point out the false accusations made against me and the false accusations of my defense against the Prophet Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. Remember folks that I made a video against the pedophilia issue. I've got a website you can also visit under this video where I go into greater detail refuting the allegations against the Prophet Muhammad but anyway, let's go through the points that Chrissy made, and inshallah by the will of Allah Almighty we will refute the allegations against the Prophet Muhammad, Islam and myself. So let's continue. Okay, so the first point was in regards to polygamy. We spoke about the laws in Australia and in regards to polygamy, and we also pointed out that the Australian government, for example, is claiming with a condescending view that yes, you do have religious freedom in this country. And basically what I was pointing out to Chrissy, she's saying it's not condescending view, it's our laws. So basically what she's saying is our Australian government can say yes, we give religious rights, we give religious freedom, but however our government does not allow certain laws in the Quran, for example polygamy, etc, etc. However, now Chrissy is claiming it's not condescending view, it's our laws. Well, it is condescending, Chrissy. Basically what your government should say is, yes, we do allow religious freedom and religious practice in this country, however we do not allow it completely and fully. There are certain laws we do not accept in our declaration. So this is what they should plainly say. They shouldn't plainly say, oh, we as a freedom of religion country allow freedom of religion. No, that is the condescending view. The condescending view is you only allow what agrees with your system, and whatever doesn't agree you throw it out. So that isn't complete freedom of religion, freedom of practice. I'm sorry, that is condescending as it is. Let's continue. Here's a side argument actually. It's interesting to see how the Australian government does not allow polygamy or multiple wives, for example. However, the Australian government completely supports adultery and fornication, and this goes to show the atheistic fruit. You know, a man can have a girlfriend called Jessie down the street, and maybe in another neighborhood he could have a girlfriend called Michelle, and in another neighborhood he could have a girlfriend called Jessica, and you know what, he could just start sharing them around week after week. But you know, this is perfectly acceptable according to the Australian democratic system. You can have many girlfriends, and you know, you could produce children from each one, right? And it's okay, there's no problem as long as you give child support. There's no problem, you can have these girlfriends, but as long as you don't sign a marriage contract, subhanallah. So you see the fruits of democratic West. But when it comes to polygamy, where you're actually looking after these women, you have to shelter them, there are certain regulations and laws. No, you can't do that, you can't. But if you want to take more than one girlfriend, you can have 2 girlfriends, 3 girlfriends, 4, you know, the morally society might not agree with it, but there's no law saying you can't have more than one girlfriend. So you see the condescending view again. Okay, so basically what Chrissy did was she'd made a third false analogy. She said that rape is considered rape under the age of consent. However, this isn't true. Again, this is condescending and a false premise. For example, if 2 boyfriend and girlfriend individuals wanted to have sex under the age of consent, let's say the age of consent is 16, or 17 or 18 in Australia, then if two 15-year-olds were to have consensual sex, which means they agreed on sex, then this isn't considered rape. She's willingly put herself forward and he's willingly put himself forward, and they are having sex. I mean, 13, 14, 15-year-olds are always having sex in this country. Why isn't there a single 14 or 15-year-old girl coming up who happens to be a girlfriend of a boyfriend? Why isn't she coming up and saying, oh, look, I've been raped? Of course not, because that's her boyfriend and they're having consensual sex. And again, Chrissy is making false assertions that Pamuk7 is trying to impose underage marriages in this country. No, I'm not going against the laws of this country, and I'm not claiming that yes, underage marriages should be accepted in this country. I respect the Constitution if that's what they've laid it, and if that's the laws of this country, then I'm not going against it, and I'm not trying to put my premise upon this country. What I'm merely showing is that the ages of consent throughout the world varies. So we're looking at the ages of consent now throughout the world, and of course, according to history, the ages from 10 to 13 were typically accepted during the mid-19th century. In Western countries, it's called the age of consent. The proof of the reference for this statement is from The Age of Consent, Young People's Sexuality and Citizenship by Matthew White. And we know throughout history, in 1859, in 1889, the ages of consent were 7 years old, and that's in California. In 1889, the ages of consent were 10 years old, and this is a fact. It's true. This was the ages of consent throughout history. And I pointed out to Chrissy that you can't label the Prophet Muhammad as a pedophile because he was consistent with the ages of consent back in his time, which is true, which is a fact, and he married adolescents. The difference between a child and a teenager or an adult person is the onset of puberty, which I explicitly put forward with all my arguments and proofs. That is a fact. Go to any dictionary definition terminology and look up the definition of pedophilia. What is the definition? It doesn't give you an age. It specifically says that pedophilia is with one person who has not reached or undergone puberty. So according to the dictionary definition, if a child has undergone puberty, it no longer makes them children according to science, but they become adolescents, which means they're going into their adult lives, which is a fact. And of course, Chrissy said, no, they're still considered children according to the Australian Constitution. Well, that's the Australian Constitution's opinion, but if we look at science and if we look at the dictionary definition of what actually makes a child, it's by the onset of puberty. That's the underlying difference between children and adolescents, right, Chrissy? Which you are completely ignoring the facts and the evidence. And again, I'm not saying that 9 or 10, 11 or 12-year-olds are children. Yes, they are children, except according to the science definition, they become adolescents if they have undergone puberty, which is a fact. Okay, the next point Chrissy brought up is, she said, is it okay to marry a girl under the age of consent? And basically I said to Chrissy, my point was, it depends where you go. You know, if we look at the world and the ages of consent, it varies throughout the world. For instance, the ages of consent in Spain is 13 to 16 years old. In New Hampshire, in USA, in 2008, the ages of consent were 14 and up. In New Mexico, the ages of consent were varied from 12 and 14 up. And if you go to Japan, the ages of consent 13 up. In Serbia, the ages of consent was 14. In Costa Rica, the ages of consent were 15 years old. And of course, throughout history, we've already proven that yes, the ages of consent were accepted at 10 years old, according to Matthew White's book. So again, when Chrissy is making a false assertion to say you are a sick man, that you accept the ages of consent under the or marriages under the age of consent, this is a false premise, because I'm being consistent with the world view, not just Australia's view, but the world's view. Okay, and I'm sorry, but we don't live in a little small glass box. We think outside the picture. So you can't label a person a sick person because he's trying to be consistent by the ages of consent throughout the world. I'm sorry. So again, my premise is yes, it is true according to the science definition and dictionary definition that these girls under the age of consent, for example 18 or 16, they're not considered children, and we made this very, very clear. You know, for example, you're saying that the ages where a person is not considered a child is over the ages of 18. That's basically saying a 17-year-old is a child. And then you said a 16-year-old is not a child, and that's over the age of consent. So basically what you're saying, a 15-year-old is a child. So again, who decides? I mean, the ages of consent change throughout the world. So if the age of consent doesn't agree with you, are you being a double standard hypocrite and labeling everyone else as pedophiles? So basically what you're saying is Mexico has legalized the ages of consent at 14. So what you're basically saying is the whole Mexican government consider pedophilia. Is that what you're saying? So be consistent with your statements and stick to the dictionary definition and terminologies of what actually is the definition of pedophilia. And I'll make it very clear. The definition of pedophilia, which will be again uploaded on the screen now, is if you have sex with a child. And what is the definition of a child? One who's not undergone puberty. This is according to your definition. Okay? Right? And again, you're saying that our government considers pedophilia or child molestation, or it considers children under the age of 16. Well, that's not what your dictionary definition is telling us. I'm sorry. Again, I'm not supporting pedophilia. I don't support these radical views of child sex, etc., etc. I'll make it very, very clear that we are trying to look at the dictionary definition and trying to be consistent that if the Australian government has said these are children under the ages of 18 and 17, well, the worldview doesn't agree with that. The worldview has laid the ages of consent dramatically, and it changes dramatically throughout the world. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, etc., etc. Okay, the second part of the video, Chrissy continues on, says she brings a girl called Nujud, age 10 and divorced, and brings a confession that this girl was confessing that she's happy to be a little girl, and she likes to play and with friends, etc., etc., and she brings up this claim. Again, this is a false analogy and a false premise, because I never said that 10-year-old girls are not considered girls, or 9-year-old girls are not considered girls, or 8-year-old people and girls are not considered girls, or little children. They are considered little children. I definitely agree with that. However, throughout history, we know for a fact, and even in our modern time, that some girls do become adolescents by age 9, 10, 11 and 12. And the fact is, a Thailand girl who reached puberty and she even fell pregnant while she had sex, she became a mother. And this is her picture on the screen right now. She's only 9 years old. She became a mother. Now, can you turn around and call this 9-year-old mother a child or a baby? Of course not. That would be ludicrous. So it goes to show that even according to 9, 10, 11 or 12-year-olds, some of these girls can become very, very young mothers because according to the science definition, they've become adolescents and they have undergone puberty, becoming very, very, very young women. According to the definition, that's what they are. So you can't just put all of these eggs in one basket and label every single 9 or 10-year-old as children in the sense that they're child. Okay, that is not the case. Some of these little children have breast growth, they go through menstruation, they go through puberty, and that's the underlying difference between a child and an adolescent. Remember, stick to the 2 criteria. When does a child become an adolescent? On the onset of reaching puberty and menstruation and breast growth, etc., etc. So an adolescent is not a child. This is the underlying difference. And I'll make no mistake, a 9, 10 or an 8-year-old are children, are child, except for those who have undergone puberty and who are now becoming adolescents. Okay, so let's be consistent with the science. Okay, let's be consistent with those terminologies. Okay, continuing on, she said, Pamuk7 says there is nothing wrong with an older man, 18 and over, to have sex with a girl who is under the age of consent. The age of consent in Australia is 16 years old. Again, she completely takes my views out of proportion. Now, my views got to do with a global standard, not just in Australia. It's to do with global standard. Now, throughout the world, if an older man, let's say, for example, 25 or 30 years old, was to get married to a 15-year-old, it is perfectly acceptable, for example, in Mexico. However, when you come to Australia, the ages of consent completely change, and I don't disagree with that. And she's saying it's wrong. Yes, well, it's considered wrong here in Australia, but in other parts of the world where they are civilized, they have democratic secular systems, they don't agree with that. They don't agree and say that there's anything wrong with, for example, a 25 or a 30-year-old to get married with a 15-year-old, for example. Why? Because their ages of consent change according to the ages of consent in Australia, and that's exactly my point. That's what I'm saying. Okay, continuing on, Chrissy said, do you really believe that an 8-year-old is an adult? Wrong. A 16-year-old is not an adult either, especially in the terms you have mentioned above. An adult is a person who is 18 years and older. And this is what she said. And notice the inconsistency. Can she actually show her proof? Can Chrissy actually show her proof in which science book, in which medical definition does it explicitly say that a 18-year-old or a person becomes, for example, an adult when they actually reach 18 years old? This is completely false, and there is no statement in any scientific or medical book that says when a person reaches 18 years old, they become an adult. And this is interesting because, remember folks, if you go back, Chrissy said the ages of consent in Australia was 16, I believe she said, something like that. And so is she considering that these are pedophiles because they get married when they're not adults, or they're in consensual sex when they're not adults? And she basically completely ignored the actual dictionary definition of what makes an adult. And I've already brought this up to Chrissy, but she completely ignored it. This comes from Western Records. It's in the Journal of Social History Online Etymology Dictionary, Journal of Marriage and Family. It says, the fact of reaching puberty meant becoming an adult in terms of maturity, behavior, and responsibility. Okay? So, for example, if a 9, 10, 11-year-old, for example, became or went and undergoes puberty, according to the Journal of Social History, Etymology Dictionary, Journal of Marriage, according to this journal, that these people, these young people, have reached the time frame of an adult in terms of maturity, behavior, and responsibility. And this is why, for example, even in Australia, that if you did a crime at 11 or 12 years old, or even at 10 years old, can you get away with it? Of course not. According to Chrissy, they're children, so they should get away with it, right? Why does the democratic system have something called the Children's Court? Because they are judged, because they are accountable. Why? Because they are now responsible, even according to their system, because they do know how to behave, or their actions do take in account, because they are responsible, because they've come to the age where they know the difference between right and wrong. So yes, it is a fact that becoming or undergoing puberty meant, according to the dictionary definition of the Science Journal, that they become adults in terms of maturity, behavior, and responsibility. So please, Chrissy, don't ignore the facts and just bring up your opinion. Your opinion counts to nothing. I'm sorry. And this is just a side point. It is true that even some 20 or 22 or 23-year-olds have not completely matured as a person. Of course, maturity sometimes takes a very, very long time. You know, I even know some 30-year-olds that act like little children. So, you know, we need to stick to the individual, and everyone changes according to their own physical and mental standards. And this is the final point I want to make. I think Chrissy said, for example, I don't have a problem with an older man, such as 54-year-old man, having or getting married or consenting to a person who has become an adolescent or something like this. This is really, really interesting, because, of course, Chrissy has a problem with the age difference of each spouse. However, even in the 21st century, historically, men often marry younger spouses, and in many cases sometimes even younger than their own daughters. It even happens in the West every day. For example, actress Anna Nicole Smith married an 89-year-old billionaire when she was hardly in her 20s. And again, I am by no means making any excuse for alleged child bride issues. I'm merely showing the hypocrisy of the accusers. So again, I have no problem if a person, for example, gets married to a person who has become an adolescent, okay? And I'm talking about throughout the world. I'm talking about throughout the world in general. That a person can get married to a adolescent, okay? However, I totally disagree with anyone getting married to children, okay? Or babies or any of this sort, okay? Islam completely forbids us against any pedophilia or any of these lies that they attribute to us and our religion. We make ourselves very, very clear about these things. And then in Chrissy's last statement, she says, Pamuk states in one of his comments that he has a daughter with his views on this subject in this video. I am very, very worried about her. Chrissy, my daughter is going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen to her. Chrissy, if you really, really care about your society and your women, then watch my video below this video. Okay? Goodbye.